This is a commission
progress.
meeting tonight on the 8th of August, 2022, and the purpose of this meeting is to have a public hearing. This is intended to be our last public hearing tonight on this. I don't think we're going to take an action. I think we'll hold that action for 1 week in case we have others that care to opine on this and get to us. But for right now, that's the intention for tonight. So I just laid that out, and I'd like you to know that. So there's no sense in holding back here. We might as well get going with this.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion we adjourn this public meeting and re-adjourn as a public hearing.
Reconvene?
Reconvene.
Okay. I'll second that convening.
You bet. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. So we're now in a public hearing. The purpose of this public hearing now is to take input. So we're going to start with Mr. Charlie Ewert, who's in our planning department. And Charlie, we're going to turn this over to you to make a presentation to us all tonight. And then we'll turn the time over to the public to go ahead and testify to us, talk to us.
Thank you, Commissioners. This has been a culmination of quite a bit of effort in several years. If you'll recall, in 2018, we met with the public in 4 separate public meetings to talk about the future of the Western Weber area specifically. And then you'll recall some probably somewhat uncomfortable meetings when we were talking about possible rezones in the Uinta Highlands, in which there were some folks from the public who were a little concerned that we've got such an aged general plan for the Uinta Highlands. And so,
And then we had a great big break of time in here.
We did.
While we were waiting for the vote out there
That's right.
to see if they were going to end up being a city.
that's right.
So this has probably been going on for 3.5, 4 years.
That's right. That's right, and even during that time, we were collecting information and getting things ready for the possibility of having to do a general plan. And once we knew that the vote for incorporation had failed in Western Weber, we immediately hit the pavement and started working on this. We hired a consultant, Landmark Design, and they helped us put together public meetings, pull together research and documents. Really put a tremendous amount of effort into this, and then once we basically exhausted our resources with them, staff and the Planning Commission started putting pen to paper, and you've got the document in front of you, which is the Planning Commission recommended version of the general plan. We started meeting with the public about a year ago now in various different public meetings. On the second iteration of public meetings after the 2018 iteration of public meetings. And we started with an open house, a town hall meeting in Western Weber. Had a good conversation with the members of the public, had a really good turnout. We had to get more chairs out in that meeting, and really answered a lot of questions. Some of the questions that I'm going to go over in this presentation here, it's been a year, so maybe some folks have forgotten a couple of things. But really kind of laid out the facts of development in Western Weber, about growth in Western Weber, and what's coming down the pipeline and what we can expect. A lot of planning is managing expectations. It's setting forth an ideal or a set of aspirations for a community to grow into. And that's what you'll see here. Some of the things that you might find on the map or in the plan may seem a little overly aspirational, maybe a little pie in the sky, and that's okay. We shoot our sights high and strive to meet them. And if we come a little bit before that, at least we're a lot further ahead than we would be had we not tried at all. So we'll find some things in the plan that it might be kind of hard to execute here and there. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to plan for the possibility of that execution. Because as opportunities arise in time, we want to make sure we are prepared for them. And putting together some ideals ahead of time helps us prepare for that. After we had our town hall meeting with the Western Weaver folks, we went up to the Uinta Highlands and we had a open house. So we put together a bunch of maps. The Uinta Highlands was a little more simple. We didn't start with a town hall meeting. We started with the open house up there. And the reason for the simplicity was we think we already know what a lot of the members of the Uinta Highlands area desire. And that's based on a lot of the public comment that they offered in the rezones that came to the commission over the last 4 years or so. And it seemed like in the Uinta Highlands, the big desire was let's build out at existing zoning and not talk about a great deal more density in the Uinta Highlands. And so you'll find that reflected in the plan. And then from there, we went back to Western Weaver in an open house after we created maps that were derived based off of public comment. When we make these kind of maps or when we create plans, it's a lot easier to put material together based off of do statements. Do this and do that, or comments that are to the affirmative of action. Oftentimes we'll get comments that are don't do anything, or as somebody once told me, it's the banana statement. Build absolutely nothing near anything anywhere. Banana. It's hard to write that down. It's hard to make a plan that says what to do with that. It also is challenging, as we know, evolution of communities happens. We know that change happens, and if we don't put some pen to paper to talk about what those changes are going to be, we are going to find ourselves in the future in a weird situation where we're firefighting problems as opposed to proactively accomplishing and addressing them. So, post that, after that meeting with the public, we refined the maps further based off of the comments that were received from them, and then we went to the Planning Commission with a proposed set of maps. And we, over successive meetings, we met with the Planning Commission. At one point, it was every couple of weeks we were meeting with them in work session. Each of these work sessions were broadcast by Zoom. People were able to participate in these meetings. And we had a small enough turnout in these meetings that they were able to even make comment, and it didn't delay the meeting or the process at all. As the Planning Commission put pen to paper or read what staff and our consultants had put together, we refined the maps further based off of quite a bit of discussion, and then we kicked out chapters, and the Planning Commission started reviewing chapters, 1 and 2 chapters at a time, until we come to where you are now with a complete set of chapters for this general plan. I believe we have 9 chapters in there. So if you'll forgive me, I'm going to run through the same presentation I gave to the Planning Commission. I'm doing so just to make sure that any members of the public who weren't able to attend the Planning Commission meeting, they see the same information that others have. I think it's really important to make sure that we are all on kind of a level playing field when we're addressing new information, that we all have all the facts and all the information. So why do we plan? We got this question a few times. In fact, there were a few people who, in their public comments that they offered to us, said, stop planning, just leave us alone. It was really interesting to hear that, because leave us alone is exactly, that's the do nothing alternative, and it's always an alternative. But it is the alternative that is leading, essentially, to where we are now, with some folks here and there being a little bit surprised that there might be some development going on next door. So the leave us alone, we know, is just what some folks don't understand is the leave us alone doesn't stop development from occurring. And it was interesting to me to hear some of the comments coming into us, because it became clear that there are some folks who live in our planning area who are under the impression that it is the county that is developing properties. Or another way to say that is that the county has infinite authority to stop development from occurring. And frankly, that's just not true. And so there's a little bit of misconception on how development is occurring. So as we were working with the public, I think it became a lot more clear that under existing zoning, there's a lot of development that can happen That doesn't exist today. But as planners, as commissioners, as the Planning Commission, I think it's our responsibility to look at that area as if every single one of those landowners executed on the land right that comes with their land. And if we look at that way, we see 16,000 dwelling units at build-out under existing zoning. And so the desire for anyone to be left alone doesn't preclude the landowner from developing the rights that they have on the land. And so it's hard to say, leave us alone, when that is the default. That is the leave us alone. We did have a few people say, in fact, this came up more than once, we moved here from Syracuse, and now you're just going to turn this into Syracuse. No offense to anyone who lives in Syracuse, beautiful community, but they wanted to move to the rural area and stay rural, be rural. The very nature of them moving to that area is one more development. And so the complaint about a developing community is actually happening by some of the folks who are moving to those communities. Now, the obvious outcome of that, or the obvious fallback perception is, well, you know, I have what I have. Let's just not let anybody else move out here. Because if we do, just by the nature of the development, it's going to change the community into something that we just don't want to be in. And then on the other hand, we had a number of large landowners who reached out both to staff, to the planning commissioners, and to the county commissioners about their land rights, and hoping that the land rights of their property don't get trampled. A lot of that, there is an economic value that runs with that, and a lot of that kind of helps those farmers or those landowners understand or realize a future financial security for themselves and for their family. And a lot of folks are depending on that financial security. So proactive planning, it leads to a level of predictability. We set our sights high, we set our sights for opportunities, and then we try and grab them as they pass us by. Hopefully they don't pass completely by. It helps us and helps communities set expectations for the future. I love to tell a story about my mom. She moved into development in Elk Ridge, South Utah Valley, and she picked the lot that she picked because there was a big open field with horses in the back, and she thought that was just the most rural thing that taking her back to her roots from when she was a child, and a beautiful view of the mountainside. And as I went to visit her the first time that I was there, and she was telling me all of about the view and about the lack of development in the area, and I pointed out the orange stakes out in the field. I said, it looks like they're surveying that property, probably for a development. Unfortunately for my mom, she didn't fully understand the due diligence process and getting a better understanding of what's going to happen with the property next door. A lot of times we see what we see right in front of us, as opposed to the visionary things that other people see, especially when it comes to land. And so now my mom looks at somebody's backyard in a very tall house instead of a mountainside, unfortunately. So we get good development regulations, we put a good plan together, and we can help set expectations so folks know what's coming next door in the future. A good plan helps stabilize real estate markets. You can imagine you go to get a loan on a piece of property or a mortgage on a piece of property, and having the risk in the real estate market that a lender has to take on, the lower their risk, the better, and the easier it is to get loans. Okay, so I wanted to show a lot of folks they're looking at the Western Weber area and they're thinking this just isn't gonna grow. We've been rural for quite a while, and there's why plan? There's not a whole lot that's going to happen out here, especially without infrastructure. And I like this scenario. I've used this before, but you see Harriman from 1997, 927 single-family dwellings. Harriman in 2007, that's 10 years, 21,000 plus dwellings. They had quite a big build-out over the course of 10 years, fastest-growing community in the state, if not the greater region.
So, Charlie, you're not putting anything on the screen, are you? Okay. Okay, I was going to say, because nobody's seen what you just said.
Well, let me try again. Apologize. Bill, can you see what I'm sharing?
It's a Zoom prompt.
So do we have to let him
I'm in. It shows on my screen that I'm sharing. Let me see if I can.
in? Stacy.
Right now, it's just the screen. Here, let me see if that did anything.
There we go.
Kind of like being on the phone after you've been disconnected and realizing you've talked into the phone for 10 minutes, not realizing no one's on the other side. Let me get out of the meeting and get back in again. Mm-hmm. I thought so, but let me check.
Craig's there, former commissioner, planning commissioner.
I see a Bill Francis
I don't. but
prompt.
I got out. I'm getting back in again. Let me make sure I'm in the right meeting.
Yeah, I don't see you, Charlie.
Here we are. Sorry about that. I was in your work session meeting from earlier today, presenting to myself.
See on here.
All right, I'm in. Let's try that again. I'm sorry. Okay.
There we go.
Boy, technology. Let's try that again. Harriman in 1997. Harriman in 2007. So growth can happen fast, especially when things are set up in a manner where the market is ripe, supply and demand is ripe. Right now, we're kind of going into a little bit of softening of the real estate market, but I learned the other day that real estate appraisers are still saying that we should be seeing some increases over the next year. Numbers that I'm not so sure we're going to see, but real estate market still isn't quite, we're not that bad off here as some of the other communities are. That's an easy way to state that. So West Central Weber 2018, I just kind of superimposed a graphic here, trying to make it look a little bit like I did with that Harriman City project. Here you go. This is existing zoning. This is 1 acre build out. So when somebody comes to me and says, leave us alone, that's leave us alone. That's what existing land rights are. And so it's hard to, I think it's hard for a lot of folks to wrap their head around the idea that leave us alone leads to this. Now that's not to say that it shouldn't. That's just to say that a lot of times we see what we see today and we want to protect and preserve what we have today or we see today without realizing that tomorrow is already a foregone conclusion. Tomorrow is going to come. Here's one comment that I wanted to make sure we hit home on. Why do you want to take the last raw land in northern Utah and make it into just another city? Again, taking the assumption that you, the county, you, the commissioners, are doing this. And frankly, it's just not what's happening. Landowners develop land, not the county. Governments provide regulatory oversight of development. Occasionally the county gets into a little bit of development here or there, but it's usually when it comes to public projects. For the most part, it's the landowners and the developers looking to develop. So growth is coming. Kempsey Gardening Policy Institute, their 2060 projections, they're projecting that the Wasatch Front will double by 2060. Projecting that Weber County will grow 70%, so a little less than double. So 2010 to 2022, I took an analogous community, a community that I think is very similar to what we see in Western Weber, and it's just right over the city border of West Haven. From 2010 to 2022, West Haven added 700 people per year to their population over 12 years. We look at the existing growth trends in the county itself, we're looking at, I think it was like 1.7, 1.8% a year. However, if we're adding 700 people per year, we're looking at significantly higher in Western Weber. So what you see here, the red line on top, that is using West Haven's plus 700 people per year. And then the line at the bottom, the purple line, that's just a linear population projection. I believe that's right around 150 people per year. And then I met in the middle on with the blue line, right underneath the orange there. That's halfway between what we're adding per year versus what West Haven City has been adding per year over the last 12 years. So even if we only grow half as fast as West Haven City has been over the last 12 years, we could still see significant growth on the horizon. So we know that growth is going to happen. We just want to make sure we put it together in an appropriate way. So what's in your plan? The plan that you have in front of you, you've got a community character chapter, land use, demographics and housing, transportation, parks and rec, utilities and services, environment and resource management chapters. You also have a last chapter for unincorporated islands, which addresses how to deal with those. So on your left-hand panel here, I'm just going to go through each of these chapters with the overall bullet points of these chapters. The community character chapter, first of all, it starts with a vision. And that vision is what is the entire plan is intended to speak to. So it speaks right, the entire plan speaks right to that vision and right to the definition of what the community character is shown in that chapter. And the vision reads, while many residents acknowledge that growth is inevitable, there's a clear desire for it to be carefully and deliberately designed in a manner that preserves, complements, and pays tribute to the agrarian roots of the community. To do this, Weber County will promote and encourage the community's character through public space and street design standards, open space preservation, and diversity of lot sizes and property uses that provide for the living, working, and playing needs of the growing community. Goal 1, Community character. A goal of Weber County is to foster a future in which the specific characteristics and differences of each small area within Western Weber Planning Area are supported and maintained as development occurs. Under that goal, if you were to open the plan, we are recommending that we create small area plans. We're biting off a big chunk in Western Weber and in the Uinta Highlands, and it's hard to get down to the level of detail that a specific community might desire. And so we're suggesting maybe annually or semi-annually, or excuse me, biannually, we come back to the County Commission with some updates to the small areas that you'll see out there. Goal 2. A goal of Weber County is to support and encourage the longevity of agricultural opportunities in the Taylor, West Weber, Warren, and Reese small areas. Goal 3. Goal of Weber County is to reduce the unincorporated area's contribution to sky glow and reduce the impact excess and unnecessary lighting has on neighborhoods and communities. Goal 4. Preserve the character of current neighborhoods by encouraging new residences to have similar separation distances along street rights of way. And Goal 5, ensure development activities are safe from geologic hazards. That Goal 5 is primarily applicable to the Uinta Highlands area. Okay. So the next chapter we have in there is land uses. I'm not going to go through the individual goals of the land use chapter. Instead, I'm going to go over just the umbrella of what we have in there. So we have planned land uses in the planning area. Large lot, 1 acre plus or minus. Medium-sized lots, about a 1/3 acre, and mixed-use residential. We've got some commercial areas, mixed-use villages that includes residential and commercial opportunities. Talking about street-oriented commercial with walkable communities. Vehicle-oriented commercial, where we're looking at, we still want to see pedestrian-friendly street designs, but these are areas that have the drive-through restaurants, they've got the Walmarts, they've got the gas station, and then heavy commercial. The heavy commercial is similar to vehicle-oriented, but a little bit closer to manufacturing. We got business, industry, and manufacturing, so we're planning for business parks, industrial areas, and looking at the area west of 8300 West for a manufacturing megasite. Open spaces. So the priority on open spaces has previously been, when you're looking at developing land, let's set aside open space for agriculture. This prioritizes that open space for setting aside open space for parks. That doesn't mean that we're not prioritizing agriculture. Preservation agriculture is at the top of the list as well. But putting smaller lot sizes in proximity to agriculture, we've heard from some of the farmers, it just doesn't work that way. And so smaller lot sizes with parks, and then larger lot sizes in the proximity of agriculture. Preservation of natural open spaces and protection of the Great Salt Lake shorelines is also in there. So this is not the map you have in front of you, but it is very close to it. This is the one the Planning Commission saw. The one you have in front of you I'll open in just a moment and show you a couple of minor tweaks I've made to it after the Planning Commission saw it. But this is an idea of the type of map that you'll see. So the different colors represent a different land use that you can see on the right-hand side here, probably harder to read on the screen. And we're looking at village areas and growth nodes along the 12th Street corridor. One of the things about village areas and growth nodes along the 12th Street corridor is it allows the county to bring in an appropriate amount of tax revenue to support the infrastructure costs of the more rural areas. So we look at these more rural areas, the agriculture and the large lot residential, and we can see that there is a financial value per linear foot of frontage of every single lot. And the larger the lot, the smaller the tax revenue that comes out of that lot when it comes to actually paying for that linear distance of their frontage. So you got small frontages and a decent amount of tax revenue coming out of that community. It's less expensive to operate and maintain that infrastructure. Whereas in a community that has commercial opportunities, such as the ones that we're planning here, you can actually offset that. So you can have those large lots without having the financial challenges of large lot development. We're looking at these commercial areas, these mixed-use commercial areas. That darker red is mixed use. So when we talk about villages or mixed-use commercial, we're talking about street-level commercial, and we're looking at maybe second-level residential. It doesn't have to be that way. You could have second-story office space. You could have all kinds of operations on that second story. But I think that you'll find that those residential uses are going to be more appealing, especially before the commercial market takes off. In order to get your commercial going, you've got to have some rooftops to support it. And then here are these other village nodes out in here, kind of looking at the same thing. Now there is one here and then one over here. Let me come back. So we're looking at actually two here on the West Haven border, and then one right here. This little triangle has been formally annexed into Marriott-Slaterville. So the map that you see in front of you on your desk there does not include that triangle. It's been cut out. These guys here, this is the 3500 West and 2550 South intersection, and then the 3300 South and 3500 West intersection. Both of those are planned growth centers that West Haven has in their general plan. And so I matched up the land uses that we're anticipating out here with the commercial growth centers that West Haven has in their plan. And then you can see one up here on 2700 North, 2600 North in that unincorporated island where we're working with JDC Ranch to create the community that they're working on out there. So those are the mixed-use village areas. As far as your industrial uses go, you look west of 8300 West, and you've got quite a bit of opportunity for that mega site that we mentioned out there. There's a pretty big community that landowners are looking at potentially creating out here south of the tracks and west of the river. And if we see that come to fruition, we'll see some pretty decent transportation opportunities coming our way, where we can alleviate some of that truck traffic from 12th Street to the 1800, 1600 South corridor, at least until it gets to the north segment of the Legacy Highway. So again, we're talking long term. We just don't want to miss the opportunities as they present themselves. Okay, in the Uinta Highlands area, what you'll see here is quite a bit of the same. Quite a bit of the same of what the zoning shows. This kind of lime green color, if you will, is larger lot, half acre to an acre lot sizes, and then the yellow here is third acre or so lot sizes. We do identify some area right here that's close to the city, and most of it is inside of their annexation area of South Ogden City for mixed-use residential. And when we say mixed-use residential, that's this color, and it's these colors. And mixed-use residential, we're essentially relying on the market to tell us what kind of housing is appropriate in that area. One thing that we know right now about the market is that the reason why housing went so crazy so fast is because we've got so many families looking for somewhere to live, and they just can't find it. It's just a simple supply and demand question. And so, especially with the pandemic, you had a lot of folks coming in from outside of the state from coastal communities with a little bit more real estate value in their pocket, able to outbid some of the locals looking to buy. So you saw that, we all saw that bump, 50% increase in many of the housing prices. Okay. Next chapter, demographics and housing.
Well, Charlie, go back one screen.
Can't do.
So this dark green color right there.
Here?
Yeah. Is that a hillside, and how much of that exists today?
It is a hillside. Now, the dark green is intended to be natural open space. The majority of what
Oh,
you see...
Woodland Drive, up by Woodland Drive.
Oh, up in here?
Yeah.
So that's the mountainside.
No, not the dark.
Woodland.
This color.
Yeah, right
Okay.
there, that color. How much of that exists on streets today?
The majority of that is built out
All
today.
right, that's what I wanted to know, the majority of that's built out.
We've got a couple of larger lots inside of this area in here, a little bit over in here, but most of it's hillside. And so getting new development out of that, I think, is going to be a little challenging.
Right, and I thought that was the case, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Demographics and housing. So state code has, for as long as I've been a planner, required the county to have a moderate income housing plan. That's well, when I started in the profession, that was one of 3 mandatory requirements under state code. Now we've got a number of new mandatory requirements. But moderate income housing has been changed over the last few years to be a little more strict. So state code, the legislature is saying, counties and cities, we understand that it's hard to do moderate income housing, but you need to start working on it. 2-3 years ago, they tied moderate income housing compliant plans to state funding for transportation. And they're saying there's a direct relationship between moderate income housing or affordable housing and quality transportation systems. And so counties and cities, if you want transportation funding, your plan better comply with what we're asking for. They haven't said, thou shalt show us that you are successful in providing moderate income housing. They haven't said that yet. But this last legislative session in 2022, they said, by the end of the year, by October 2nd actually, you need to show us what your implementation plan is. And you have to have at least 5 items on our menu. So the state code has a little menu of items that we can choose from. You need to have at least 5 items that you have an implementation strategy for. And those 5 items need to be implementable over the next 5 years. They didn't say implemented, but implementable.
And does this plan get us to that point?
This does, for the
Okay.
Western Weeper. We're going to need to talk to Ogden Valley a little bit differently, but this does get us there. There is one element of this plan that we're going to need to come back and chat with you about, and that is the implementation strategies. I think we're there. All this new stuff started happening after we were writing the chapters, and so for the most part, we are substantially in compliance. There's one thing that we need to talk about, and that's going to be what is that implementation strategy on 2 or 3 of those items. Okay, there's that growth projection that I showed you earlier. One of the ideas behind moderate income housing is to intersperse it in your community. If you collect it all and you put it in the corner, a lot of people say, let's just hide it over here so it doesn't affect our property values. Well, what that does is that creates a challenge for that corner that you're trying to hide it in. A services challenge, a policing challenge, a code enforcement challenge. If you take moderate income housing or affordable housing and you speckle it throughout your community, you're doing 2 things. You are providing upward mobility opportunities for the folks who are in moderate income or affordable housing, and you are creating a sense of community in which people can see that there are multiple types of socioeconomic situations. It helps with a sense of empathy for your community. And it helps bind together a sense of community when you find these opportunities. And overall, it turns out to be a much better community than if you just stick them in the corner. One opportunity I had, I went to a resort community, Keystone, in Colorado, and they've got their moderate income housing or their employee housing tucked in a little cove in the corner. And a lot of what you see over in that corner is trailer homes that have been brought in from outside. And it didn't look terrible, but it didn't look like it would have belonged in their resort area. Whereas if you had one apartment here and one apartment there in a nicer building, the apartment itself doesn't have to be super great or nice. It still could be market demand. But something here and there throughout the community, you wouldn't have even noticed there was a moderate income element in that community. So that's something that we're suggesting occur in the
So
Western
Charlie,
area.
I'm giving you 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay.
Well, let me keep moving through. When we're looking at the active transportation, you've got trails came up as one of the most important things that the public chatted with us about. We had a few people say trails aren't important, but for the most part, consensus was revolving around trails. So we've got some ideas on creating active transportation facilities. We want to make it clear in our plan that we're planning for people, not just their cars. We know that cars not going away. Cars important. Cars are a vital part of our lives. But when we create street infrastructure in which the only way for people to get around is by getting in a car, that's when we start reducing opportunities instead of creating or incentivizing opportunities for something else. We're looking at street cross-sections. When we say we need to pay tribute to the rural agricultural heritage of our communities, we're talking about swales or rolled curb. We're talking about sidewalks and trails. And a lot of folks said a suburban area is the curb or high back curb and gutter and sidewalk. And if you take that away, it just opens it up and feels a little more rural. And so these are the cross sections that we're suggesting. We've got our street and transit map. The map that you see in front of you has a little bit more detail than this guy here, but for the most part, we're just looking at what the transportation load is in that area and how to spread it out so that no single road is the only road that that the vehicles can drive on. We did have a few people say throughout the process, they said, we've got 4,000 south, we've got 3,300 south, we've got 2,550, we got 1,800. Why do we need any more streets anywhere? The idea behind this is as you create street redundancy, you are creating opportunities for vehicles to go in multiple directions. And so it's not all funneling down the same streets. Ironically, most of the folks who made that kind of a comment, they didn't live on one of those main streets. And so the folks who live on one of those main streets would very much rather see traffic flowing a different direction. Active transportation, as I mentioned before, is an important consideration. We're looking at all the main roads, collectors and above, for both pathways and for bike lanes. So the blue line with the yellow dash is a pathway, the green line is a bike lane. And this is just an illustration to suggest that these are the streets that we're targeting here. Okay. Parks and Rec, this was probably one of the more fun ones because we had a lot of folks who were really interested in this idea. So the big question is, what kind of parks do we want? Working with Roger Heslop and the Parks District for the West Weaver Park District, we identified that there should be a park, one every half mile for a 5-acre park and one every 2 miles for a 20-acre park. And that's to say that a residence should be no further distance than half a mile and 2 miles from a park of that nature. Parks and Recreation map, big focus on the river and emphasizing parks and recreation along the riverway. We did have some landowners concerned about focusing on the river and the potential land rights that come with that. And it's fun to work with those landowners to help them understand that when they go to develop, we're looking at these kind of opportunities, or we'll work with them to identify mutual gain opportunities. It's not usually just a grab and take and put a trail down. And so it usually assuages some of those concerns. There's that river, the Emerald Necklace. It's just a necklace that connects the emerald gems together. Many different communities are growing with this planning principle in mind. Uinta Highlands. We actually had a good conversation with a few people in Uinta Highlands talking about the possible need for a park district for themselves. We did mention that if they want to create a park district for themselves, they may want to start talking to the commissioners about that. We've got it in the plan that if the opportunity presents itself and if the public is amenable to the idea, maybe a park district can be created. As we look at the properties out there, we look at the undeveloped lands, and we think about possibilities for parks to go on those undeveloped lands. This is what we're looking at in this area. So we've got there's quite a bit of hill slope down in this area here, but if those landowners ever wanted to sell to a park district to create a park, this area here would be a great spot for a park. There's a big piece. This is probably the last large enough piece for a park. Up here, the elementary school is right about here. And so right now it's being farmed, but if that landowner ever decided to sell for a different reason, it'd be great to have, if the community rallied its financial assets and was able to purchase it for the purpose of a park. Okay. We go into some details about utilities. State code changed this last year again to require us to do water concurrency. And so we're looking at how much water we use per capita. You'll see that in the plan. That'll help us in the future create standards and mechanisms to try and reduce that. The state wants to reduce the per capita water consumption by 20% by the year 2030, and then 30% by the year 2050. Okay. The state code has also been modified over the last 5 years to require a county resource management plan. And the county resource management plan, that's the document we use to sit down with the federal government. The Forest Service, the BLM, and other federal partners, they've got a requirement to collaborate and cooperate with the local entity. And what collaborate and cooperate means is sit down with the local entity and find out what they've already been planning. If we come to the table without a plan and we say we want the moon, they're going to say, well, show us where the public supported that idea. So here we are supporting it. Okay, here we are getting to the end. Planning Commission gave a unanimous recommendation for approval. They requested to allow staff to have the authority to make minor clerical edits as necessary. So when we move the document from a Word document into a published document, we might find some things that we need to tweak just a little bit. And then they requested that the County Commission not consider any new rezone until the principles of the plan have been implemented with changes to the development code. Any questions about the plan itself? Let me pull up
Questions,
those maps for
Commissioners?
you.
Doesn't
Question.
look like- Yep, go ahead.
Question, if I might, Mr. Chair,
You bet.
and then a comment. Charlie, when was the last time that the West Weber County General Plan was updated? And that would include also Uinta Highlands.
So Uinta Highlands, their plan is literally called the 1970 to 1990 plan, the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So that one's been a very long time. The plan that is guiding growth in Western Weber right now is the 2003 general plan. We've made some tweaks to it over time, small tweaks in the vicinity of the 4700 West and 12th Street intersection. We added a resource management plan to it and updated moderate income housing. But other than that, there hasn't been any other substantial land use modifications in those
Okay.
plans.
So it's been some period of time.
That's right.
Great.
It has been.
Okay, that's my question.
Great.
Here's the map that you have in front of you. Oh, maybe.
There you go.
There's a map you have in front of you. I changed the colors just a little bit to be a little more bold.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One of the changes that you'll see is right in this area. Let's see if I can zoom in here. The version that was previously published showed a brown blob, brown meaning business, office space. So this is between the Weber River and the
Slough.
the slough there. And after a little bit of dialogue, commissioners, with you guys, we've got a brown area surrounding, buffering the river, buffering the slough, buffering 12th Street, with a little bit of manufacturing, light manufacturing in the middle, so kind of an island of light manufacturing there. Looking at this little triangle right in here between the river and 4700, we took a little bit of a buffer along 4700 and colored that area, recolored it back to green for agriculture. It's really good agricultural land, and so we're looking at looking for to the long term for agricultural operations. The development over in here, working with the prospective buyers of the property, they asked for some tweaks over there. Nothing substantial or significant, but you could see a little bit different in configuration.
You point out, if you would, for the public, Charlie, that black and white, like those lines, those are prospective roads.
Yes.
Just makes it a little tougher to see, but
Sorry, these are very big maps. Okay.
Especially with bad eyes.
there you go, thank you.
Yep, so as you're looking at these, the black lines, those are roads. In fact, there's a line legend on the right-hand side of the document, but those are potential roads for the future. There was an exercise that the Planning Commission and myself were going through, and we were looking at where roads could be aligned, and we were doing it over Zoom, and I was just hand-drawing with my little electronic pen on the screen, and apparently I accidentally paved right through a home, and a landowner made sure we heard about it. And so when you're looking at these, we're not intending to pave through homes. We're definitely looking to avoid homes that exist, but provide the grid system and fill that grid system in. Any questions for me?
I think not, Charlie, from us.
Okay. I'll keep this up for your
Please.
comments.
This
I
will be good.
suspect as people come and comment, they would like to be able to ask questions or look at it.
Okay, great.
Thanks, sir. We appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so we come to public comment tonight. There's not a huge crowd, so we'll give you a little latitude here. We have a clock right here that will start and give you 3 minutes. We ask you when you hit the 3-minute mark, I'm not going to cut you off, but start winding it down at that point. That should be plenty of time. But all those who'd care to comment tonight, it's your time right now. So please state your name and the city you live in. No more than that, and then go ahead. Don't be bashful. You all came here because you have opinions.
Good evening, Commissioners. Brad Blanche, West Weber. For me, I said this in the Western Weber Planning Commission Forum, I really love this plan. I think that you did a fantastic job in gathering public feedback. I think the planning staff did a really good job, and nothing's perfect, but this gets a long way there. I wish this plan had been in place many years ago when I started on my adventure. This is just a really good map, a really good forward-looking task that you guys have taken down. A couple thoughts that occurred to me that I think the general plan, again, is a great plan. Charlie made comment around the state has a mandate to try to conserve water and reduce per capita water, and I'm sure you're aware of this. It feels like the objective for a developer is at odds with that approach because of legislation that's currently in state code. What I mean by that, the state pretty much dictates the amount of water that can be transitioned from flood irrigation to pressure irrigation. And it leaves quite a bit of a gap in the amount of water that actually ends up not being used to the residential lot. And so a developer like me, we put on plat how much water could be used for each lot, but there's a natural incentive to waste water because of that conflict. And I would just say that first, it would be good in the future if the county, maybe already doing this, looked at that a little bit closer. I know on the agricultural side, probably many of these farmers would say this too, the state has a policy of use it or lose it. And so there's not really any incentive to conserve water today, either on the developer side or the agricultural side. Second thing that I would want to offer is, and I love what Charlie said about trying to maintain a rural look and feel to the roads. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I personally, my wife and I were over in Plain City the other day. I have always really liked inner city Plain City where they don't really have, it's noticeably rural in the country. It's a good feel. I feel there's a conflict right now between the general plan and what's being required via engineering, in that we tried to do a lot of standard rural roads with a low impact, meaning less asphalt, but we just couldn't get away from curb and gutter and all the concrete or ADS pipe infrastructure that has to go in there. So I'm hoping that Charlie can take that vision for the rural roads, take it a step further, and get some encouragement with the engineering department to bring that to life, because I think it's a fantastic concept. So thanks again.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. All right, others. Yes, go ahead. Who's online? Stace? Mr. Everett?
Hey, hi, this is Kathy Everett. How are y'all doing today?
Yes, sorry. Yes, go ahead. Time's yours.
Yeah. So there's a few things that I wanted to bring up, and just thank you, first of all, for everyone's time and effort on this. I noticed that in the plan itself, there is a night sky initiative to reduce some of the lighting in the area, and I'm hoping that as we continue down this path, that addition and commercial and industrial is put into place, that night sky initiative is something that can be focused on. Also, I would like to see building height addressed. I mean, there's recent news stories that have addressed the incident at BDO with putting those monstrous buildings next to residential. And so I was hoping to, and I know that that is something that the community addressed in the prior plan. I think it was the 23 plan, that as industrial and commercial come into the area, that building height is regulated. Three other things that I'd like to talk about is, one of those is the Wildlife Action Plan. And I understand that the plan today actually makes considerations for the Wildlife Action Plan. However, there's very specific items within that action plan. And I would like to see this plan drill down into more of this and have more specificity around how Weber County is supporting the state of Utah's Wildlife Action Plan as they're continuing to look at this general plan. A lot of that, the state has received a substantial amount of money in looking towards how we're maintaining our wildlife. And I don't believe that an environmental study has been completed of the area to look at the natural waterways and understand the natural floodplains to ensure that we are enhancing the wildlife. One other item that I would like to discuss is the open space that is currently designated on the plan. As of right now, some of that open space is private property. And I would like to fully understand if that private property that's being designated as natural open space will be open to the public. Right now, it's all very private property. There's no public access. And if it's being designated as an open space, will the public have access to that open space? I'm assuming this is being done through conservation easements. And I would like to see how the county is going to be handling those conservation easements with the donations of these lands, if that's the case. I think that otherwise additional open space needs to be considered, because if not, you do seem to have some private benefit from hunters' funds that are being purchased with hunting licenses, but no access to public lands. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate those comments.
Yep.
There was somebody who got up and started on the way. Sorry about that.
Hello, thanks for having the meeting. I'm Sherry Gilmore, and I live in the Uinta Highlands. I didn't really have any comments actually planned out, so it might be a bit of a ramble. I just had a question. There is an existing part of Comby Road in the Uinta Highlands that's currently and inexplicably kind of an almost private road. It's one way, it's got 2 stop signs, 2 speed bumps, and it encompasses maybe a quarter mile. But I, looking at the map, did not see that that was going to be incorporated as one of the new proposed roads. And it seemed like it made sense to me because there's room there for widening. There are about 700 kids at Uinta Elementary. A lot of them walk home. And I think if you're putting in a bunch of new roads where there did not used to be roads, you're maybe putting them in a little bit of danger. And if you went with that area of Comby Road that already exists, that I don't see on the plan, but I might have read the map wrong, that would make sense. They're already used to it. I don't think it's going to confuse anyone or put anyone in any extra danger. So that was the only thing that she didn't address that I had to add. I just wondered about that one little section of Comby, and if there was a plan to maybe use it instead of creating a new road, and if not, you know, what the problem was with that. And that's...
Thank you.
I had one little last thing that I thought it was funny. Leave us alone, because we were left alone for a long time. For 25 years, we had to contract our own garbage and find our own recycling, and we were okay. We did that. Last year, somebody just unilaterally decided we were going to have a different provider, and they don't do recycling anymore. We've made peace with it. But we were okay with the left alone thing for a while. We were used to being the last street paved, and we were okay with it. I just thought that was a funny little nugget that I would add, is that sometimes everyone's okay leaving us alone. It's only when it's not really going to be to our benefit that we're not left alone. I understand the growth will happen. I just hope it's being looked at in a way that will take into account, you know, people did move there a long time ago, and it was how it was, and we knew it wasn't going to stay exactly that way. But some of the new roads, I don't know, they're not making a lot of sense. So I just had a question about Comby, and that was the main thing I wanted to say. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Others?
I'm Colton McSwain. I'm in the UNA Highlands as well, and I'd like to thank your time, and Charlie, thanks for all the work. I want to piggyback on what she just mentioned too. I'm one of the larger landowners that is, I won the lottery. I've got both reserved as recreation and 2 roads through my property. So it's beautiful. The thing that I just wanted to point out is I don't know exactly. I'd have to guess that the UNA Highlands is 90 to 95% built out. And to the safety of the kids, there's roads through every piece of green property there, just about. We've got roads all over. People don't move up to the UNA Highlands for connectivity. I don't know who they're talking to, but I can talk to 40 people immediately and they'll come tell you, we don't want that, we want our kids to go play and not worry about a road going through it. So I was just mentioning that. I think we've missed the boat on the whole notion of connectivity in that area simply because of what's built out already. I understand that there's future growth, and I'm a big part of that. I enjoy developing. I've invested in real estate all across the United States. I've been through the development process dozens of times. I understand it. But the biggest thing, in particular with my property and connecting to Comby, is some of these roads we need to look at if we're going to add that actually do make sense. Charlie and the county engineers walked my property, and I believe their exact words is it's not only not economical but not feasible, because it's not just a little steep, it's very steep. And so I just think if we look at these plans, and especially for our area, we ought to be smart with how we're throwing things on the wall and protecting our kids from that. And I agree with her that some of these roads don't make sense. We probably do need to make some things adjusted and changed, but these aren't some of them, and I think it just needs to be talked about a little bit more. So I appreciate it. You can't please everyone, and I totally understand that. But as far as what I've talked with my neighbors in our area, they're not thrilled about the ideas of it, but they understand there needs to be some changes. Just needs to make sense for our area, especially with the little amount of growth that is remaining. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Others?
Good evening, Commissioners. Sarah Wickern. I'm in Uinta Highlands. And just wanted to say thank you for your time and for the county planners for all their effort and what they've done. Uinta Highlands is a difficult proposition. I was raised in Uinta Highlands, and it has changed a lot while I've been there, and the lack of a plan has caused, so I personally am very concerned about the connectivity. Growing up as a child and getting to the elementary is difficult. Comby Road is a particular issue, possibly not the connection that the previous resident spoke about. Getting down, we can't control I guess we could address that later, but the one-way street we can't control. It's not part of Weber County Incorporated.
That's the Uinta Township.
Yeah, that's part of UN, and that is
We're aware
something.
of that.
I hope we can address that some way, somehow, but in this venue, we cannot.
We've
But-
tried.
I would love to see it done. But just around the elementary itself and somehow making Comby Road crossable and safely crossable for both cars and people at this point, because as Uinta Highlands is slowly infilled, and the roads were not built according to the general plan, even in the 70s. We have a few short connections here and there that would provide a lot of safety, both automobile and children. Now, whether the extension of Comby Road down the hillside is feasible or not is something for the future to be decided. But I think the important emphasis would be Comby Road through close to the elementary school. So that would be my concern.
Thank you.
My name's Michael Porter. We've got about 500 acres and several other 100 acres under contract. Looking to also add more acreage. We're pleased. Most of that acreage is south of the railroad and west of the river. We've worked carefully with Charlie. He's made some great suggestions modifying our thinking. He's also been open to what our experts have told us and recommended for our property. And we're comfortable with the direction of where the general plan is now. And we support it. We hope that you'll support Charlie in his preparation and his recommendation as well. And I just wanted to go on record as being optimistic about the future of the West Weber area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Charlie, can you move that for the people here? Can you move the map back to West Weber and off? I mean, thank you for making that oriented. Thank you. Just thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, others.
Oh, here we go.
Hello, Commissioners.
Hello,
Lance
Dave.
Peterson, Taylor, Treasurer of the Taylor West Weber Parks District. As far as the Parks District, I thought Roger was going to be here tonight. Maybe he's on the phone, I don't know, but we didn't want to pass up the opportunity to address the plan and just maybe reemphasize what Charlie mentioned, I think, in the third bullet point of recommendations from the Planning Commission about, and I'll probably use the wrong terminology here, Charlie, so bear with me, but making sure that we've got the ordinances in place to empower the county to implement this plan. Would that be a good way to say it? And a case in point, give you an example. I've already spoken with one developer who showed me his rough draft of 20 acres and said, yeah, here's 62 homes we're going to put on that. And I said, well, where's your open space? You know, where's your parks? Well, we don't have to. It's going to be 1/3 acre. So already, before this is in print, there's some misinterpretation and miscommunication regarding the plan and some of the requirements for development. Is that, am I saying it right, Charlie? Is that okay? All right. So that's the main thing that we would like to push forward is emphasize to the commissioners the need to have some ordinances in place. Otherwise, we could have a cluster, and I don't mean a subdivision.
Well, Charlie, while they're still thinking about it, why don't you get up and answer a few questions here? And we'll see if we can't spur on a few more. So first one I wrote down here was last one up, the fact that how are we going to pay for parks if people don't donate property in their subdivision? So how does that happen?
So the plan actually lays out a couple of different options, a few different options. So let's say we've got a piece of property that is large enough to support a community park, a 5-acre park, and still get a financial benefit out of it with a rezone. At that point, I think we would want to work, well, have ordinances in place that works with the developer to set that property aside. If it's not 5 acres inside of their subdivision, or maybe their subdivision's too small to really support 5 acres, it's 5 acres somewhere else that has been identified either by the Parks District or by the developer and agreed upon by the Parks District.
So we have impact fees that we charge them that would allow the county to go out and purchase 5 acres for a park.
That's right. And
Okay.
so we've got a couple of different ways to do that. So fee in lieu, which I wouldn't call an impact fee, I would call that a project improvement fee.
Okay.
We've talked a little bit about the difference in the past. I would say the park district should adopt an impact fee. And if we create, or if they adopt that impact fee, we could do just like we do with the fire district and collect it and then remit it back to them on their behalf. That's for the system improvements. For the project improvements on a subdivision by subdivision basis, we would look to the developer to either escrow funds to the park district in the amount that would help supply the amount of acreage and infrastructure for those parks, or donate acreage to the park district.
So Charlie, I thought we collected an impact fee for parks today.
We might. I'm not entirely certain. I know we don't for this park district here. We may collect an impact fee for the Western Weaver.
Stepped outside.
I'll have to.
I was talking with Roger about that, and their challenge is in order to create an impact fee, you have to have an established level of service, and they don't have a park, so that they haven't been able to establish that level of service.
Approved a taxing entity for Ogden Valley for parks.
Yeah.
We haven't done that.
Oh, but we do have the park district out.
Yeah, but they don't have taxing authority.
Well, we'll check on that. Get an answer. Okay, other question was a wildlife plan.
Mm-hmm.
Have we tried to tie into the state wildlife plan?
Yeah, what Kathy mentioned, we in our resource management plan, we reference the state wildlife management plan and say that the county will support the state in execution of that plan. What I heard Kathy say was she wanted us to go a little bit further and put some of the principles and the goals of that plan in this plan. And if that's something you guys are interested in doing, we could certainly do that.
Okay, night skies.
The plan does talk about night skies. In fact, that's in community character. We know that we're not going to eliminate sky glow on this side of the Wasatch Front. Ogden City and other developed communities that don't have night sky ordinances, they've got enough dark sky pollution, light pollution, that we're probably still going to move towards more light pollution than not. But that doesn't mean that this community needs to contribute to that. And the further west you go, the more stars you can see. And so we did hear from the public on making sure we get that executed.
Well, I have to admit, though, as the Upper Valley's developing, I like the night sky initiative up
It's been
there.
in place for a few years.
Yeah, it's been in place for a few years, and it's long enough now that it's noticeable when you drive up there.
Good.
Where it didn't used to be.
Good.
That's basically just a hood on the light. There's still the same amount of light on the ground.
That's right.
Right.
It's just a hood over the light so it doesn't shine in the sky.
That's right.
The other thing was less concrete.
Less hard surface for streets?
No.
Curb and gutter, he talked
Curb and gutter versus roll gutter. Can
Yeah.
you talk about that? Because I think we made an allowance for that.
Yeah, so on the street cross-section that the plan lays out, which to Mr. Blanch's questions and concerns, it definitely should be rolled into an updated standards, and I've been working with the engineers on that. What it does is it creates the hard surface or the asphalt pavement, and then the edges of that asphalt to uphold the integrity of the edges of the asphalt. We've all seen the cracking edges on the edges on the shoulders of the road. You pour a 12-foot wide concrete ribbon or a rolled curb, depending on the drainage needs of that specific road. And so instead of doing a high back 2.5 feet worth of concrete for the curbing, you'd be looking at a 12-inch ribbon on the edges.
I think it makes
12
it.
inch, not 12 feet.
I am sorry, 12-inch. Thank you.
I think it makes it feel a little more rural if it's a rolled edge, and I actually tend to agree with that. I do think it makes it feel a little more rural if you do a rolled edge. So there are provisions in there to do that?
Yep.
Okay.
In the street cross sections.
Xeriscape and less required water on the property.
Yeah, I glossed over the utility section, but that's where water concurrency comes into play. There's a big emphasis in that water concurrency section that talks about reducing water demand overall. which encouraging and incentivizing xeriscaping, maybe even requiring it in some circumstances, may be appropriate. But at the very least, encouraging folks to move towards a drip irrigation system instead of an overhead sprinkler system, regardless of what they're using that irrigation water for. Agriculture, lawns, whatever it may be, or not lawns, but xeriscaped yards, whatever it may be, using a drip system as opposed to an overhead sprinkler.
Thank you. So, Sean, a question to you. Do we collect today an impact fee for parks out west?
Commissioners, we do not collect an impact fee for parks. We collect impact fees for roads, sewer, storm drain, and trails, but not for parks, where the park has its own district.
They could be, and they could be a taxing entity like we've done in Ogden Valley. Is that correct?
That's
But-
right,
But that
yes.
would require a public vote.
Correct.
Okay.
So we collected, or we created a park district, and then we don't collect an impact fee if they don't. I was kind of the example that was brought up was 20 acres, and they're going to get 60 third-acre lots, and it isn't that much. You have to take out for roads, but you know the point's still well taken. I thought we set aside some of that if they didn't have the dirt and wanted to give to the park, that they could go ahead and do that in, what'd you call it, in lieu of, or in?
Fee in lieu or donation of land in lieu. Yep. all
But
of
we
those
don't
things.
require that, Sean.
So, but the plan suggests that we do.
Yeah, the plan would suggest that we start down that path.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I'm all in favor of that, because I absolutely think that's right. You know, that's all part of the character of the neighborhood,
Yeah.
right?
And Mr. Chairman, you've got a lot of control and a lot of opportunity in making sure that happens, because none of these properties, adoption of this does not apply these new land uses. Every single one of these properties have to go through a rezone in order to get this. And through that rezone process, you've got the legislative
Right.
discretion to say, we're not going to rezone you unless the park district is happy.
That's when we have the control.
Well, I tell you, I'm all in favor of looking at that.
Yeah.
All right, those are the questions I had written down. Charlie, did you have others that I missed?
I did, if you wouldn't mind me going through.
Let me look here.
Commissioner Harvey's looking to see if he had any online.
Open space, there was another Kathy Averett, open space that's right now is private, will it be open to the public?
So what you'll see here, just to make sure it's clear on what we're talking about, we've got big open space areas down along the riverway in here. And
It's not showing up, Charlie.
Bill, do you have the ability to put that back on?
There we go.
Team effort. Thank you. So we've got open space areas all along here, along the river, and then up in this area here where we've got the little Weber that makes their inlet.
If you guys can follow that, you're better than me. You are going fast.
Okay.
Sorry, there's a delay. There's like a 2-second delay as well.
Anyway, we get it.
So basically, you got a lot of private land up in here.
Right.
There we go. The question is will we require that to be publicly accessible? And that's certainly worth exploring as we move towards development in this area here, and it's not something the plan anticipates.
Right.
I suspect areas like you just highlighted there, those are fairly heavily hunted wetlands, and there's a lot of private clubs out in there and private lands bought on purpose to be. So I would expect the answer for that northwest portion of that plan is no. They will not be readily accessible to the public because those are all fee areas to go out and hunt.
Yeah, and I think that's when Kathy...
Well, and maybe even to the south a little bit because, you know, you got Ogden Bay out there.
That's right. Yeah, that's right as well. There's a lot more publicly accessible land down here near Ogden Bay. The state owns a lot of that. Kathy Averett and I had a good conversation earlier today, and I think her primary concern is if this development here comes in, we're going to see a lot of challenging opportunities for hunters to come out here and hunt on the public land, which means that the area to the north becomes kind of the default area for hunting, and if it's all private, then a little bit of a challenge in losing some public hunting lands where we're creating new private ones, I think is what
Of course,
I
Ogden
understood her
Bay's-
concern.
That's all still public.
Up in here?
Ogden Bay.
Oh, yeah.
Ogden Bay
Yes.
is-
Yeah. Yep. And they're far enough away, I think, from a lot of what that development opportunity or activity is in there that they could probably still hunt.
Well, you're saying two things to me. He said that it's going to be more difficult, and how is it going to be? I don't understand how it's going to be more difficult to still hunt at Ogden Bay.
So when you're looking at the development of the south side of the tracks and west of the river,
Sure.
what I understand Ms. Averett's concern is when that development goes in, you're going to be limiting the opportunities for hunting out there because you can't shoot within a certain proximity of a road and development and so forth. And so they'd have to go further out to in the Bay Area as opposed to closer to that riverway, I think is where the concern comes in. Does that answer the question?
Years down the road, but yeah.
It will be years.
Feet's the answer, right?
600 feet, yeah, I think you're farther apart than that.
Yeah, I do think so as well. I think there's quite a bit of a buffer here, but it's a concern worth noting.
All right. Other questions? Did you have something else, Commissioner Harvey?
No, I appreciated the comments from my neck of the woods out there from Colton.
Do you have anything you want to say about Colby Road or about?
No, just to reiterate what was said earlier, that's why I've looked at that and talked with the mayor of Uinta a lot of times, but that little piece there is Uinta City, it's not in the unincorporated area.
Correct.
But because of what you said tonight, I had another epiphany, and I'm going to call Gordon tomorrow with it. I have another little idea.
Great. So, Commissioner Ford, do you have any questions or answers you want to?
No questions or answers, just a comment when you're ready.
You bet. I'm ready. Go ahead.
So, well, we have members of the Planning Commission here with us. I wanted to acknowledge the hard work they've done. This actually has been a heavy lift for the county.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And for our Planning Commission that spent countless hours going through this, seeking public input, receiving that public input over the last 12 to 24 months, in my opinion, we've arrived at a great spot here. We really, at the 10,000-foot view, there's people out there that come to the commission and say, we want you to stop growth. And I'm open for suggestions. I don't know how we do that, since 60% of our growth now comes from internal, which is our own kids and grandkids. The other part that we have to consider as we look forward is, well, stop development, take away property rights. Well, a lot of our property owners out there that have invested in property over the last 50 or 100 years bought that property with certain rights. Personally, and I think the commission supports that it's not in government's duty to take away private property rights. So what we can do is then we can look at planned growth or controlled growth that's going to come. Charlie showed what's going to happen over the next 20 or 30 years, which some of us won't be around that period of time, but I think it's incumbent upon this commission that we look for the future and come up with a plan that makes sense for those kids and grandkids, that they can may have somewhat of a future out in western Weber County that some of us grew up with. So I just want to, and Charlie, you and the planning department, I think, have done a great job explaining this. And anyway, I think that obviously I think we're going to be open for suggestions over the next week or so. But I think it's time to bring this to a conclusion. And again, the public has had a number of opportunities to have input, and they still can continue to do that over the next period of time. So if you have questions, anybody in the room or online, get your questions in, get your comments in now.
So you kind of looked my way when you said some of us won't be here.
Well, I'm not gonna point any fingers, but I know what year you graduated from high school, so.
Same year as Brent Davis right there.
Really? Okay, well,
Gosh.
there might be some in the room that fall in that same category.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I agree. I would like to thank all the planning commissioners who worked on this. We've got a tremendous planning commission, and they worked their guts out on this. Hours and hours, and we've met with them multiple times, and I really appreciate their efforts. It's been interesting to go through this. We were highly criticized in the beginning because when the referendum was there to become a city, we kind of stopped. And several wanted us to continue on, and we had a hard time because we felt like the energy had kind of left to do this. And so we elected, between three of us, to put it on the shelf for a year until that took place. And it didn't pass, and then we picked it right back up afterwards. But I don't know. If you're going to criticize us for that, then the criticism is probably due, because we did put it on the shelf for a year to wait for that to take place. And it came together nicely afterwards, so I'm not sure it hurt anything other than it cost us a year, but I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Lance, you held your hand. Did you want to make another comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to step out in the hallway.
Well, come on up here. You got to say it in the mic again. Yeah, this isn't taking as long as we thought, so we're open to more comment.
Oh, thank you very much. I had to apologize. I stepped out in the hallway with Sean to clarify something, so I didn't come up here and speak out of turn. Lance Peterson, resident of Taylor, 2550 South here as a private citizen. First, 3 years ago, I brought 2 petitions to you commissioners, and it was signed by every resident from 3500 west to 4700 west, with the exception of about 4 people, asking for a compromise on the widening of 2550. The canal at 2550 over the Wilson Canal is really narrow. You know, let's fill in the ditches. Let's move the telephone poles back, but please don't do to 2550 what the county did to 3500 west. It's a great road. You know, 3500 west is a wonderful road, but if we're talking about trying to preserve the rural residential feel of Taylor, widening it to what we've got further through West Haven will kill it. I would then ask, well, let's rezone my property to commercial and my neighbors to commercial, and we'll sell out and move somewhere else to Montana. But
That's where you want to go, is Montana.
what? So that would be the please compromise with us. You know, I spoke with the UDOT project manager in Salt Lake over the Legacy, and he said not every road has to connect, and they don't dictate which roads connect to the Legacy. And our feelings were that will really impact our homes. I live on 2550. It'll destroy my home. Then going back to the questions you had on the Parks District, one thing I failed to mention, I meant to apologize, was that our plan is going to come out for public comment pretty soon, and we'll have our hearing October, November, I believe. And we're real excited to be able to work with the county and developers on trying to develop the parks, even along the river. We're not charging impact fees. We had a really good lesson. Charlie took us to school one day and explained to us about project impact and system maintenance, and so we're almost ready to start doing that. We felt like we couldn't do it legally until we had some land, and hopefully one of these developments will give us the land here pretty soon, and we'll be able to jump on that initiative for impact fees for project and system is what we're looking at. So
Thank you,
we're there.
Lance. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
So just going back to my other hat, please consider 2550 for us and talk to us, please. Everyone except for about 4 people signed that petition, and that's, you know, when you're looking at this kind of an effort to get people's input, there's about 100 people's input, and we were just begging you, please don't do that. Please work with us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we've got
You got one
somebody
more.
else here would like to say something.
Shay Bitten, I live in Taylor. I just had one question about the water. I know
Pull
you
that
guys.
mic closer, Shay.
I know you guys are working on the zero scape and working towards that, which is great. But I'm wondering how will the water work when the developers are developing their property, and like when they give parks land over to parks? Like, how is the water going to work? How are we going to have enough water for everything, and who's going to be in charge of that? And
So-
how will it be developed and stuff?
Traditionally, water moves from ag to residential. And depending on who owns the water and who serves the area, it's a little bit of a cumbersome system how it moves across. The big supplier out in the west is Weber Basin. But Weber Basin wholesales most of their water to the water districts. And so you have lots of other water districts, and as that happens, that water transitions over from ag to residential. And depending on who you believe, I spent 4 years as chair of the Natural Resources Committee, and I was in the middle of these arguments all the time, and they tell you that ag water is a 1-to-1 crossover to residential at the average of 3rd and 1/4 acre lots, if you don't netscape and xeriscape. Many want to say, well, there's savings there, and that's quite an argument whether that savings exists or not. But I'm just telling you, it depends on which expert you talk to, because they all have different opinions on that.
You do. You had Mr. Favero.
Mr. Favero.
Yes. Tom Favero, Taylor, Utah.
Speak
We've
into
been
that
a
mic,
life-
would you? We can't hear you.
We've been a life residence out there. My grandfather started the farm in 1903, and we're at the bottom of 2550. And what you've done to 2550 from 1900 west all the way to 3500 is a very good thing, and it needs done all the way to the bottom. I run a large farming operation. We cannot get the machinery up and down the roads. It seems like when the power company does move the poles, they used to be on the opposite side of the drain ditch, now they moved them out close to the streets. So when you run the large equipment up and down, you can't get up and down. I've got all the people that thought they wanted to be in a city that moved out to Taylor. That I heard a good reference the other day. They said, well, I'm amongst all the cityots. I'm amongst all the cityots. I can't get up and down the road with the tractor, and I'm like the worst hated person when I do go up and down with a swather or anything that goes slow and is large. The roads need to be improved. They need to be widened. It won't kill what looks like rural or not rural. I couldn't operate my great-uncle's farm up by Tractor Supply. I had to turn that over to the Stratfords to farm that ground because they're within a mile of their yard to take care of that. I had to give that up for the last 15 years because I can't go up and down 2550 because it's so narrow. So I'd appreciate the road widening. I look forward to this general plan. I think it's a good plan. We need to do something with smaller lots. We need to conserve our land. We need to conserve our water. And this plan covers a lot of that. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I can make a comment on that
Yes, please.
2550.
Go ahead.
So just for way of information, that actually would be a WACOG project, not a county project. I was actually out on that site the other day reviewing that with the Transportation Committee. There are issues with that. If you sit there at the intersection of the Wilson Canal and 2550, I would hate to be taking a swather across that. And with the increased traffic we're going to see out there in that area because of the 3 schools that will eventually be built, I am concerned about future safety needs. So again, it won't be a county decision. That will be a WACOG decision. It's one of 11 projects that are being evaluated as we speak.
And on that Wilson Canal, who's actually responsible for that? Is the canal company responsible for the bridge over the road, or is the county responsible for the bridge over the road?
Well, that would be part of, if it is improved, that would be part of the WACOG funding to put some type of box culvert in there to expand it. So to answer your question, it's county.
Yeah, now the one up on 3500, I know we're on the board, my brother's on the board of directors for the Hooper, and Hooper actually had to pay for some of that widening. And so it seems like when they put the guardrails in on that 2550 for the Wilson Canal, they actually put them in further than they should have been when they did do the remodeling on the guardrails.
Could be, I don't know. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Others, please.
My name is Brent Davis from West Warren. In this plan, it talks about a big industrial park out west. I want to know where the water's going to come from. Right now, none of that property has any irrigation water. You've mentioned here we want to cut it back 20% and 30% save it. So when we plan, where are we going to get that from? And bringing in big industry, you can drive all over Ogden and see hiring. We're hiring. It's hard to hire people. I want to know how you're going to, what kind of plan you have for anything like this.
So I'll answer that. Well, in fact, Gage, this is actually your portfolio. Why don't you answer it?
Well, in terms of water, from my understanding, and we've been dealing with a couple of property owners out there, that there is a good amount of water that's actually owned by Western Irrigation. A great deal of that's Weber Basin. There's also some from the Warren Canal. I can't tell you the exact number of shares, but obviously without the water, that it will, and we're looking at that as we look at potential companies coming in with the idea that we want to obviously conserve that water, and there's no existing plans to use any of that water right now other than the current landowner is using Weber Basin water for irrigation purposes at this time.
That is on the north side. It is not on the south side of the tracks where a lot of this is.
Well, so you're exactly right. That's north side. The south side I'm not as familiar with, and you may be accurate there. But obviously they're going to have some source of water, whether that's Weber Basin or other, before it can be developed.
So, Brent, I'm on the Weber Basin Board, and there is water that's in that pipe that runs down 12th that's available for purchase. And those people on the south side of the track could go under the track and buy that and use it. So it's available today. That's an 18-inch pipe that runs out there, and that was expanded to a 24-inch, I think. Right, Sean? Yes. Yeah. And that goes to about 7,600 west right now, right in there. And before this road gets expanded and finished the rest of the way, which is 2 years, Weber Basin is planning on expanding that pipe in the road probably next year. And I see that look on your face because I know you're saying, "Oh, are you kidding? We got to go back into construction." They will expand that to 24-inch the rest of the way. And they've also set money aside to replace the tank that is on the hill in Little Mountain, and there's two out there now, and they're going to replace it with a great big tank that'll take place of that. And that all will take place before the road expansion and finish out there. Today we are dealing with people on property out there right now that want to come. So it's a pretty active site, not physically so much, but on paper and behind the scenes. We've got a lot of activity on that area out there. Okay, others? Yes? So the commercial zone would allow people services so they didn't have to drive all the way to Ogden to get them. And so as people move in, you like to set apart areas for commercial to serve that group of people. And I'll give you a good example. Over there in Plain City, where Kent's Market is right now, we set that zoning side in there about 14 years before Kent actually moved in and bought it and developed it. And today it's a small little commercial area, but it's actually very vibrant and active, and it's a great little area. Well, I suspect these areas that we're talking about here will develop very similar way. Building height. Charlie, do you want to talk about building height?
Sure. That's a detail the plan doesn't go deep into on building height. So when we get writing new ordinances for these commercial areas, that'll certainly be a detail we'll need to address with the Planning Commission and with you guys.
Okay, great.
Good to know.
I've got a couple other thoughts, unless there are other folks
ahead.
who want to make comments. There were a couple of things that didn't get touched on. Working my way backwards here. Mr. Favero mentioned how the power poles seem to get closer to the asphalt rather than further away from the asphalt. The plan suggests to underground. Now, at what point do we underground existing infrastructure? That's a different question, and who pays for that? That's a different question. But when a new developer comes in and improves their frontage, if there's a power pole there, they're going to bring it down, underground it, and then bring it back up on the other side if there's existing power there. So the plan does anticipate that. We'd have to change our ordinances to make sure that's a requirement. Ms. Bitton mentioned some concerns about water and making sure there's enough water. I believe what she was referring to is if we're setting aside open space or if we're developing new land, how is that water going to work out? And the answer to that question is the Park District has been very clear with us. They don't want any land unless it has water, and so they want to make sure that gets part of the gets into the code. It is definitely in the plan as a need as that comes down the pipeline. If there's not enough exterior irrigation water for yards, then the answer is going to be xeriscaping, and we're going to have to come up with a pretty good program, a robust program on how to enforce that. And then the last thing that a number of people were talking about was Combie Road. Bill, would you put the map back up? I just wanted to make sure something was clear about how a planning document works versus an engineering document, for example.
Right there.
So what we're looking at over there in the Uinta Highlands area is opportunities. What happens in the future when we find opportunities? Not necessarily this is what's going to go right here. And we're just talking about maybe if we ever, for example, reconstruct Eastwood and Combie, maybe we need to be looking at a traffic roundabout or something like that. Again, there are people who own land right there, and so if they own land right there and a traffic roundabout is going to affect them, it is something we'd need to go into the engineering details on at that time to work with landowners. And so this is not the absolute final outcome. This is opportunities. You get down a little bit further on this map on Combie, as Combie goes down that hill and goes into Uinta City, it is a big issue that you've got a one-way road right there. And so the plan does talk about collaborating and cooperating with Uinta City to try and make that, make reasonable improvements to Combie along that one-way so we can make it a two-way. In the event, for whatever reason, we can't make that a two-way, it's going to be important that we look for other opportunities to get folks who live up in the southern part of the Uinta Highlands in here out. There's only one way right now, and that's Bybee connecting down to Combie. Either that or going up to Skyline. And we know that that area is prime for fire, especially with the railroad track right there. And so looking at where Combie intersects with Highway 89, we know that UDOT wants to rebuild Highway 89 to a limited access freeway. And so we want to make sure it's clear to UDOT that Combie needs to have a north and a south connection on Highway 89 and be an emergency egress or a way out for folks who live in this area. Mr. McSwain lives up in this area here. He gets both the parks and the roads. What we're actually looking at here is a couple of different opportunities. We want to make sure that Mr. McSwain and the other landowners in this area had open-ended opportunities. You've got crosshatch green overlaid over top of the yellow. And what that means is we're anticipating that at some point in time, whether it be the families who live in this location or their successors, they're going to want to develop the vacant land. It is steep, but we've seen steeper be developed. And so the yellow suggests what happens if they come in and ask for a development. Like, the answer would be, yeah, the plan suggests that you should be able to develop this. Maybe we can get you a rezone so you can develop it to the highest and best use of the property. The green crosshatch indicates an opportunity for the public or the county to work with those landowners to create a park. Both of those things compete with each other, right? And it really comes down to what opportunity presents itself at the time. Do we have a park district to buy a park there? Then we work with the landowner to do that. If not, they want to develop, then they develop. So just trying to carve out opportunities for the future.
There, Charlie, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Please.
You're looking for like, we're talking right in there, that'd be like those zip line park is about the only thing I could see going in there. Not pretty steep, but it'd be a
Yep.
wild ride even at that.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty steep down in that area. That's for sure. It may just be a nature park of some sort.
There's nature down in there. And that's one of the things, this group here, for those who are from Uinta here, that's why it's vital we keep Comby Road both ways coming down there. It's no stranger that we're actively, there's some hearings going on right now with the engineer to work on 84, 89, then coming up the top of the hill and be involved in those. If you take that away, that egress away from Comby Road, that being incorporated into a new plan goes away. So keeping that open now is important if you want to have another opportunity for people to get out of there with a fire. And we were very much in there 6 years ago when that thing lit on. Was all up in smoke.
Yeah.
So that's critical.
That's all I had for you.
Good, thank you.
You bet.
Well, if nobody else wants to say anything, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Going once? Yes, please. Come on up.
So my name's John Larson. I live in Plain City, but I'm here on behalf of Northern Utah Radio Controlled Aircraft Club, which is on West 12th Street out in Reese. And I appreciate your time that you've taken to meet with us and work with us and everything else. My big question is the big developments that's going to the north of us, the big heavy industrial development. I know there's a lot of mud flat and salt flats out in that area. The Army Corps of Engineers, I know when we've modified ours, we can't take away or add to unless you pay a whole bunch of money to cover in the flats. Has that been taken into account? Because I know there's a lot of that up north. And is that left to whoever's developing the property?
You want to answer that? You want me to?
I can answer that. So a portion of that has been approved by the Corps. Actually, there's 200 acres on the north side of 12th Street that's been mitigated. The Corps has approved it. In the future, we expect there'll be additional Corps analysis on as we have requests for potential development. But right now, the portion on the north side of 12th from 8300, well, about approximately 8300 west, has been cleared by the Corps of Engineers.
Okay.
So it has been approved.
So for them to just cover it up or to?
No, so there's been no wetlands. So they come in and analyze for wetlands, and if there's any mitigation that needs to take place, but there was no mitigation on that particular piece.
Okay.
That's been required by the Corps of Engineers. So now there may be obviously other potential wetlands to the north that will have to be resolved at some point in the future.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Thanks again.
You bet, thank you. All right. Well, with that, I think we're ready to make a motion.
Motion to adjourn public hearing and move back into a public meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Very good. So we kind of stated at the beginning of this meeting that our intention was to wait to a week from tomorrow before we approve this to give any last-minute comments a chance to come in. So that's our intention. We're letting you know that. So with that, I think we're ready to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks for coming out tonight. We appreciate it very, very much.